We, of course, are the California Advancing PREA Project, and we have this great update coming up. But just a quick reminder, we are working collectively with JDI. Is everybody able to see the slides? So let us know in there what happens. So Just Detention International is a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual violence in all forms of detention. And as you know, we've been partnering with Just Detention International to get all of you the support and capacity building that you need that is happening with the California Advancing PREA Project. And JDI's core belief is that their fundamental belief is that when the government takes away someone's freedom, it takes on an absolute responsibility to protect that person's safety. No matter what crime someone has committed, rape is not part of the penalty. And then JDI doesn't accept sexual abuse as an inevitable part of prison life. We know that prisons and jails with committed leaders, good policies, and sound practices can keep inmates safe. And we have a perfect example of that today with Captain Stark. And of course, we have CalCASA. Our mission, the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, is committed to ending sexual violence through a multifaceted approach of prevention, intervention, education, research, advocacy, and public policy. CalCASA provides leadership, vision, and resources to rape crisis centers, individuals, and other entities committed to ending sexual violence. CalCASA envisions a world free from sexual violence. And I believe Jessica is on now.
Yes, I am. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting my bearings. Am I supposed to be talking?
While we do that, Alexa, we have Victoria, who is part of King's Community Action Organization, is here with us too. And we have Alexa from Riverside as well, and Carol from Women's Center High Desert. So thank you all who have joined, and again, we welcome you. We're just going to share some exciting news and just do a brief overview of the California Advancing PREA Project.
Okay, sorry about that. I had my audio on, but not the visual on. So now I've got both. So the California Advancing PREA Project is in its third year now, and it's a California Office of Emergency Services funded project where CalCASA and JDI are partnering not only to build strong relationships between the agencies that you all work with and CDCR, but also to create sustainability with those partnerships, all with the intention of making sure that victims have access to you all, victims on the inside. And so the goals of the project are threefold, mainly to help advocates and prison staff understand each other's roles and culture. It really is kind of like speaking different languages, to help build the capacity of the rape crisis centers to provide these trauma-informed services, and then, of course, again, to develop those services in a sustainable way. And so just like with any of our web conferences, we are going to be speaking on sexual abuse and sexual violence. And so if at any moment you need to take a deep breath, or you need to just mute yourself or mute us, or whatever you need to do, please feel free to take care of yourself. So our agenda today, we should be a little on the shorter side compared to how our web conferences usually go. We're going to introduce Captain Shannon Stark, who's the statewide PREA coordinator for CDCR. We're going to give you all a really exciting update about crisis line access for survivors inside, including going over some new flyers that are going to be distributed to the CDCR facilities. And then we should have plenty of time at the end for questions. And as you can see on this next slide here, here's some photos of the three of us. So we will have Captain Shannon Stark speaking, and then Liliana, who you probably know, and then there's my photo down there at the bottom, and we're all very excited to be here.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. And like we shared earlier, we're so excited to welcome Captain Shannon Stark to our web conference and introduce her to all of you. And just a little background on our collaborative efforts with CDCR. Captain Stark has been working with JDI and CalCASA for the past 3 years as well on this project. And so her leadership and her vision for this has been an integral part in our success in this project and our great working relationship with CDCR as well. So I'd like to just share a little bit about Captain Stark. Captain Stark has worked for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, for a little over 23 years now. Over the course of her employment, she has worked at 3 institutions: in the background investigation unit, the contracted beds unit, and at CDCR headquarters. She started as an officer and worked her way up through the ranks to her current position as captain and as the state's PREA coordinator. Some career highlights include working in investigations and activating the Folsom Women's Facility. Her role as a PREA coordinator requires that she interact with, train, and assist 37 PREA compliance managers assigned at each institution throughout the state. Her team of 5 staff are on the road much of the time, traveling to each institution to identify areas needing improvement and to help prepare for upcoming PREA audits. Every sexual abuse allegation CDCR receives is investigated by an institution's investigative service unit or the Office of Internal Affairs. Her team provides assistance and specialized training in for these investigators. They also compile data and prepare various reports. It's a very busy job for Captain Stark, but she loves it and believes in its importance. And so I just want, this is a great introduction to Captain Stark and her, dedication to this project. And as you heard, there's only 5 of them for the entire state, and only one PREA statewide PREA coordinator, which is Captain Stark. So as you know, that's a huge undertaking for them, and so we appreciate all that they do to connect with us, to meet with us quarterly, and ensure that you all have access to the facilities, and that we coordinate together on how to better provide services for those that are victims of sexual violence behind the prison walls. So welcome, Captain Stark, and with that, I'll turn the time over to Captain Stark.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me involved in the web conference this morning. I really appreciate it, and I really am excited about the new things that are, the new abilities CDCR has to be able to provide your services, to make those accessible to inmates in all areas of the prison, which will be toll-free. So currently, inmates are able to call REAP crisis centers, but the call is a collect call to you all, and it's also a recorded call. So upcoming in the near future, we will have confidential calls that are toll-free to inmates. So I don't have an ETA on exactly when that will happen. The liaison with CDCR and the phone provider are working together to make that happen. But that's going to, I think make things really good as far as follow-up services for the offender population. As you on the screen, if you could go to the next slide, please, Juliana. On the screen, there are examples of the postings that will be going up in all institutions in all areas throughout the state. So it has, the Rape Crisis Center's logo on it and their information, which we already have posted throughout the institutions. However, now it will have the information directly on the poster that these will be toll-free calls and that they are confidential. Currently, confidential correspondence or confidential communication with Rape Crisis Centers is facilitated via confidential mail. So the mail is treated as legal mail when it's addressed to a Rape Crisis Center. So that's one way that they've been communicating with you all confidentially. However, it will change where they can have these confidential phone calls. So that's a big change, and I think in a really good direction. With these new postings going up, you'll probably see an influx in calls. With the knowledge on the poster that the calls will be toll-free, you may receive more calls. So you may receive a larger volume of calls, and you may receive calls that aren't necessarily what they should be calling your number for. So, Jessica, I think this gets turned over to you for a little bit.
Yeah, Liliana, I think you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Why don't you go for it?
So what I wanted to also add to Captain Stark's, big, awesome news is that there might be some changes happening. As you can see on here, this poster will be in every CDCR facility. So that there is some understanding from inmates that when we talk as the Rape Crisis Centers talk to the individual and say, if you're moved, if you don't know who your local RCC is, look for this teal help is available poster, and you'll be able to identify who your local Rape Crisis Center is. So this is huge for us, and then Captain Stark and the team has talked about, there has been conversations about, facilities not knowing who the RCC is, not having the poster with the local information, although they did have one. It was really generic. This will stand out next to the OIG poster, to the CDCR poster, and now this one. And we, like shared on the screen, this is an example of what you all will have. We included Sure Helpline since we had their logo, but it's going to include your logo. It'll include your information with your hotline number, and it'll be available in Spanish, English, and Hmong. And hopefully as we see the need, we might have to add another language poster in there as well, so that they know how to communicate with us and how to reach out to their local Rape Crisis Center. So this is going to create uniformity so that folks know exactly where to go and how to get that help if needed from their local Rape Crisis Center. And so this is a huge, huge, huge opportunity for us to, reconnect with our facilities. And also, like Captain Stark mentioned, we don't have a date because it is, there is a process that we need to follow. But this has been really led by Captain Stark and her leadership and vision behind this. So we're really, really happy that Captain Stark has really, moved this along. There has to be a conversation and reaching out to their phone providers so that these phone numbers are unblocked. And again, these are free, non-recorded, confidential calls to the local Rape Crisis Center. And so when you're doing advocacy and you're connecting, whether it's via letter, via a forensic exam meeting with an inmate, that you let them know that this is available and that it's free and confidential, non-recorded phone calls. So this is really exciting, everyone.
Mm-hmm. And so sort of with this in mind, and I do want to also, again, thank Captain Stark for her advocacy on this because this is such a big deal. And as Captain Stark mentioned, it's likely that the rape crisis centers might see an increase in calls, right? And so we want to make ourselves available as the California Advancing PREA team to really provide any support that folks might need around that. I know a lot of folks are already receiving crisis line calls, and it may just be that there's an increase temporarily. But really the sort of message that we want to send is that these crisis line calls are really not any different than crisis line calls that you might get from folks in the community. Historically, we've always sort of talked about when getting a call from a detention facility that you want to remind the caller that the call might not be confidential, right? Once this rolls out, though, that script is going to change a little bit where we get to actually say, just like with all our other calls, that not only is this call confidential, but that it is not being recorded, and that we want to make sure that we, even though it's on the poster, when folks are receiving those calls, we want to reiterate that so that they really know that not only is the poster saying it, but that we, as advocates also are saying that as well.
Yes, and I'm looking at the chat box, and I love all of your excitement on this as much as we're so excited about this huge benchmark in our project. And one of the things, just kind of to remind everyone to normalize that trauma response, right? Again, you all have the skills to provide the support for all folks who are victims of sexual violence. And I wanted to post this picture. As you all know, those that have been providing services or have toured the facilities, some of these phones might not be as, these calls might not be as confidential because someone's there next to them on another line or on another call. So just kind of keeping that in mind still will be really important in providing that trauma-informed support for them. One of the things that, as we were talking with Captain Stark, was really talking about obtaining that consent to do follow-up services. If you receive a phone call from an inmate who has been a victim of sexual assault, there isn't going to be a way to keep that completely confidential if they're requesting follow-up services, as you all may already know, because we need to disclose their CDCR number and also who the inmate is. And so from those initial calls, if you get requests for follow-up services, make sure that you're obtaining that consent for follow-up services, even if it's just verbal, or if you want to write out to them in a letter, in that confidential letter, you let them know as well through there. And the other thing to keep in mind that is changing a little is collecting the inmate's name and CDCR number. And the reason behind this need for that, we'll definitely kind of talk about more in depth about it and why and the information we need to get. But because these lines are now free and non-recorded, the inmates will not have to put in their CDCR number to call out. So there's no capture of who that person is or where they were calling from. So in cases of emergencies, this collecting inmate name and CDCR number is going to be really vital in ensuring the safety of the inmate. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that and how and what information we need to collect from those who are calling. And please, if you have any questions, the chat box below is available, and we'll have an opportunity at the end. But if these questions come up now, please feel free to ask us through the chat box. So a couple of things to consider. I think both Captain Stark and Jessica mentioned this, is that there might be an increased volume of calls coming in. And as you know, in your experience with working with inmates, is that, you know, once they get this information and this information is disseminated to the population, there might be calls coming in to check, what is this line? Who is on the other line? And so we might get those increased volumes of calls that are just, that inmates might be checking out, like, what's happening, right? Who am I talking to? Is this really confidential? And so you might see that, and you know, again, treating every call as it was someone who has been a survivor of sexual violence or a victim of sexual violence. Remembering that the survivor may be still in that public space, and again, they might be, you know, testing things out. So again, keeping those skills that you already have and that knowledge you already have, you know, in mind when providing this support. And the other part that we want to talk about that Jessica, you know, kind of touched on earlier as well, is that in the past we knew that call times might be short because they were collect calls, or, you know, and so this might change. You might see that folks might be able to have longer conversations with you, but we as a team were talking about what best practice would be, and it would be the best practice is what you already do with survivors within the community. So, you know, usually this isn't therapy, right? This is a crisis call support line. And so keeping that in mind, we're not going to spend hours on the phone with folks, but, you know, providing that crisis support immediately is what we're wanting to do with these phone calls. And if there's need for follow-up or another call, absolutely, you know, let the inmate know that they can call at a later time, at another time, to provide that ongoing support, whether it's via letter writing or via the hotline.
Mm-hmm. And then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jessica. This is Captain Stark. Something that you may also encounter with this now toll-free, non-monitored calls is, like we had discussed a little bit earlier, is inappropriate calls. So I know that many of you, or probably all of you, are already experienced in that with dealing with the community. I'm sure that will probably increase as far as the prison population contacting you for inappropriate reasons, and then also potentially asking you to do inappropriate things. So that would be like, you know, I really need to talk to my mother. Can you please do a three-way call with my mom, which I'm sure that you already know that that's not permitted with CDCR. If an inmate contacts you and asks you to contact somebody else and patch them in as a three-way call, it's not permitted. One of the things that corrections does is when an inmate calls out to the community or to a person in the community, the phone call is preempted by you're receiving a call from an inmate out of prison, and then it's a collect call, and then gives the person the opportunity to accept the call. So some people do not want to accept the call, and they need that opportunity to deny the call, which if you called in three-way, that would compromise their ability to not talk to somebody that they don't want to talk to potentially. Some other things that inmates may ask you that are inappropriate is to send a message to somebody else. And if you're receiving calls like this and they're bothersome and they're an impact on your workload, these are things that CDCR, we really need you to contact us on. This is one of the reasons it's going to be very important that you obtain the inmate's name and CDCR number, because that's the way that we're going to be able to get back, you know, contact the inmate and put a stop to them contacting you for inappropriate reasons and then impacting your workload. Without the name and number, we won't be able to do that because of the confidential, non-recorded, toll-free calls, and so many calls going out of an institution at one time. We won't be able to narrow it down to who made the call to you without you obtaining the inmate's name and number. All MOUs that were developed between the rape crisis centers and the institutions they all have an attachment A, and we've just recently found out that there may be some issues with some of the MOUs being completed, and we're working on trying to figure out where the holdup is. But all of them were developed, and all of them, an attachment A was developed. So you should have that information on the attachment A to the MOU. You'll have the prison's information. So you have the PREA compliance manager, which the PREA compliance manager is at a managerial level, typically works like a 9 to 5 type shift. So you may not receive a call during 9 to 5, so that might not be the person that will be easiest for you to get a hold of. Every institution, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, has a watch commander. So all attachment or Exhibit A's have the watch commander's phone number on there. If you receive a call from an inmate, they say they're suicidal, that's an emergency, contact the watch commander or anybody on that list who will then take action to make sure that the inmate is safe. Also on the Exhibit A is your information, is the crisis center information. So if you do change phone numbers or you have a change in your director or your hotline number, any of the information, that's going to be really important that you communicate that to the PREA compliance manager so that we can update the Exhibit A so that on both sides we have really good information so we could even have better communication with each other.
There is a question here from Lauren regarding the answering service. So some of the RCCs work with an answering service who then transfers the call over to the local center. And so Lauren is sharing that calls can be dropped in the transfer from the answering service to the office or an advocate. So if folks have any similar situations with their answering services, please let us know. But I think that just to kind of troubleshoot that question, we see that happening within the community as well, right? That when the answering service answers that call from a community member, that in the process of transferring those calls may be dropped. And so I think that that's part of our education to inmates on that this can potentially happen. And so we really encourage folks to call back if the call gets dropped. If you prefer to have your office number, please let us know. But we really we looked at the 24-hour hotline so that it could be accessed at any time by somebody who is seeking support. And so that's the reason why we went for hotline instead of office numbers, because office is closed. And so if an inmate is in need of support at 7 o'clock, what happens then? Are they transferred over to the answering service? So just, again, if you need that additional support, reach out to us and we can work with CDCR to change that and navigate that.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing, if I may add, that I think can be helpful in terms of learning the landscape is connecting with your facilities and asking at what hours inmates have access to use the phone, right? And do those hours change? And so, it may not be that folks can call 24/7. It may be that folks can only call between this time and this time and this time and this time. So knowing that can help in terms of staffing. It can help in terms of knowing where the call should go. It can help in terms of training, like if you have folks that are typically answering the hotline during those hours, to make sure that they are aware of this and have any additional training or support they need as well.
That's a super good point, Jessica. So most institutions, depending upon the security level of the population, the absolute latest that the calls can be made would be about 10:30 at night. Some, for a higher level security institution, it would be earlier than that. It would probably be, the latest would be about 9 o'clock at night. But also, I think that's a good point. If you are running into issues, or if you're seeing an increase in workload at a certain time, contact your PREA compliance manager. He or she can provide to you what the hours are of the phone calls so that you can, be prepared for maybe an influx in calls at a certain period of time.
We have another question here from Tabitha over at Weave. She'd like just to clarify, if an inmate is using the line inappropriately, sorry, just went up, and we want to make a report, that goes to whom?
So so on your Exhibit A, you actually could contact, the PREA compliance manager would be the best person to contact for that. You also have the information for the investigative services unit on there, and they're actually the ones that will do the work behind investigating what the inappropriate call was, who made it, and what we can do about them not doing it again in the future. Watch Commander is going to be more for your emergency stuff, but any of the people that are listed for the institution on the Exhibit A are people you can contact if you receive inappropriate calls.
Great, and the other part to this was also with respect to retaining their name and CDCR number for report. Can we do so without outing the inmate for calling the PREA RCC line?
I don't really understand what that question's asking. Without telling the inmate themselves that it's inappropriate?
So I think the question is, if an inmate were to call and making inappropriate phone calls, and they reach out to the PCM and say, hey, this is happening, that would out the inmate for calling the PREA RCC line. And so I think just to clarify a little bit more about inappropriateness is exactly what Captain Stark mentioned earlier. If you're getting folks that are calling, and like we do in the community, when we have calls from folks who are doing something else that they shouldn't be doing on our phone calls, right, on our crisis line calls, you let them know, this call is for victims of sexual violence. Do you have a need for support? If not, I'm going to have to hang up and keep the lines open, right? So just making sure that we as advocates, remind folks of that. And then also, if we see that this is consistent, if we're hearing that the same person is calling over and over, I think that's when we take that time to say, hey, I'm going to have to report this if this continues to happen. And, again, collecting that information, you might be able to, they might give it to you, they might not, but what we want to encourage is that constant communication with the PCM to let them know, hey, I think that these, some folks are taking advantage of this hotline, right? Is there a need for education? Is there a need for a follow-up from you all so that inmates know the purpose behind this line, So again, it really just, we want you to be, let us know as a PREA team what's happening so that we can relay it back to Captain Stark if we're seeing some trends, right, happening, but that you are in constant communication with your PCM if folks are really using the line for other things.
That's right, Leon. I think the first best and quickest approach is to immediately let them know that the line is not for that purpose, just like you had said, and it sounds like it's exactly what your training is for people that are calling in from the community. That's going to set the tone for the rest of the call, and that's also going to help alleviate inmates from calling that number for other purposes. Exactly.
Thank you, everyone. And so this kind of leads over to what information we should be collecting. And I do want to make a note that this is brand new for all of us, right? This is, the first time ever in California that, inmates are going to have access to RCCs through a toll-free, non-recorded line. So we're going to have some bumps in the road. And this is why we wanted, Captain Stark to join us and announce this to all of you, because we're going to go through this together. If things come up, we want to know. We want to be able to work and ensure that this is, again, a way that we continue and that it may be replicated throughout other states or even within other facilities that we're working with. And so one of the things that we talked a lot about was when that inmate calls, there's not going to be that information that, oh, it's an inmate from, this place calling you. So we're going to have to gather certain information in order to better support inmates who are calling our crisis line. So we all have intake forms. We all take down information. And sometimes, as survivors might be, willing to give you information, and at times not, until that they build that rapport or that trust with you on the other line. And so, some of the things we thought absolutely we need to start getting is that inmate name and CDCR number. So you've heard that throughout today's web conference, that's going to be essential to ensuring that, one, if there is, an emergency, you have that information and that you're able to provide that to the person inside the facility. And then again, asking for inmate housing will be really, or inmate housing unit will be really critical too, because that's going to help you know where they're at and who to talk to let them know in cases of emergencies. And so just as you all are starting to, we're going to let you all know when this is officially rolling out and everything, but what you need to start thinking of is, do I need to change some of my intake forms for PREA so that it includes the information to collect, like the inmate number, CDCR number, and inmate housing unit. And you might already have it, which is great. And if you don't, I would really highly encourage you to have that on your intake form, so that if advocates are collecting this information or on your hotline volunteer advocates, that they also are reminded that if they get a PREA call, these are things that they should be collecting. And that verbal consent that Jessica really can talk a lot about with you.
Yeah, so I think, one thing, because we're talking about folks that are very often communicating via letter, we definitely want to, during that phone call, ask if they would like follow-up via mail, where you can send them a packet or just, reading materials or more information about your services or, any sorts of things like that. And so one of the things that you'll want to do is, of course, get verbal consent to do that. Of course, you also can't send anyone mail without their name, their CDC number, housing unit, and all that kind of stuff, which is another reason why it's important to get that information. The other thing, too, is for folks that where their agencies have the words rape or sexual assault in them, you should also ask, this is what our agency name is. Is that okay to have on the outside of the envelope? And it may be instead that you're putting maybe a name or you're shortening, you're using an acronym for your agency, just in case that that survivor that you're talking with may not want, to receive mail from, an agency that has, the word rape in it. And then, of course, to be sure that you're including the privilege evidence code on the outside of the envelope, which, Liliana, I think it's 1034.2, or am I getting that right?
1035.4.
5.4, okay. And the mail rooms at CDCR facilities, the folks that are working in those mail rooms are trained to understand, as Captain Stark mentioned earlier, that letters that are coming from rape crisis centers are treated as legal mail, and so it's important that any outgoing mail that you're sending to folks include that on the outside of the envelope, so that the mailroom staff know to treat that mail differently. And then, of course, if you're getting that verbal consent, it's always helpful when sending follow-up to include a consent form so that you're able to have that consent documented as well for any future communication.
Great, thank you so much. And so with that, we thought, let's talk about harm to self or others, right? And so one of the things that we discussed was the need for us to talk about inmates who might be suicidal and what to do. And so again, I think we follow protocol and procedure on that for each RCC and what you all already do. So then the initial disclosure that you're calling, obviously you want to say that this call is obviously non-recorded and confidential, but if there is harm to self or others, there will be a need to report. And so if that is what, most agencies, unless, anybody else has another protocol, that's usually what we hear, and what we know is that if they're suicidal, we'll do an assessment, right, and then we'll determine if there's a need for us to make a call. So follow your agency steps in addressing suicide, and follow that agency protocol and procedure regarding the suicide assessment. But again, because these calls will be free and confidential, if you do have an inmate who is suicidal, that CDCR number and inmate name and housing unit will be essential in ensuring the safety of that inmate. And so when talking with Captain Stark about this process and how we as RCCs might not have all of the knowledge base behind what happens if someone is suicidal, I really wanted Captain Stark to address the steps that might happen if someone is suicidal and you need to make that call, so that we all understand as rape crisis centers that the facility has their process, and what does that mean in terms of us providing follow-up services and support for inmates who might be experiencing that. So Captain Stark is really going to talk about what happens inside the facility if you all were to report a suicide call.
So CDCR receives a suicide call, immediate action is taken. So you can call any of the numbers on that Exhibit A until you get a hold of somebody. Once you get a hold of somebody, all staff are trained on their responsibility when receiving information that an inmate may be suicidal. The inmate is removed from the location that they're in and placed in an area where they'll be under direct observation. Mental health is on site at most all institutions at almost all times of day and night. If it is an institution that doesn't have a mental health professional on site, they always have somebody that's on call. The inmate remains under suicide precaution or suicide watch until the mental health professional comes in. They assess the inmate and then make determinations as to the extent of if the inmate needs to remain on direct observation, if the inmate is okay to be on maybe a watch where we're checking them every 15 minutes. They really make the call on that because then it really falls into their specialty. During that time, an inmate is not allowed to make phone calls. So if they're on suicide watch or suicide precaution, they will not be able to make a phone call. Mental health meets with them until they determine that they are stable enough to then return back into a regular general population, or sometimes if they're so unstable, they may have to go into a place that has a heightened level of mental health participation. So inmates can be anywhere from like a low level where moderate medication helps them with suicidal ideation, all the way up to where they have to be restrained so that they don't harm themselves. But again, that's a mental health call. But during that time, they will not be able to make calls out or to send letters.
Sorry, go ahead, Captain Stark.
No, go ahead.
No, so what I just wanted to say is this is why it's so important for us to connect with our PCMs and understand the process that CDCR takes to ensure safety of their inmates. And so that might affect our ability to connect with that person. And we might not, having this understanding kind of clarifies for us, I think, at least that why we're not hearing from the inmate, and understanding their process. So like Captain Stark said, they might be under observation where we can't talk to them at that moment, or we can't write letters or receive letters from that person, but know that CDCR has to follow policy and protocol for suicide calls, but that you, throughout the time that you're on the phone with them, that you inform them that, if, that at any time they want to call back, they can when they have access to you all, or that they can look for that teal poster, that flyer, and that they'll find your address on there too, if they want to write back to you and talk to you. So again, just kind of reminding folks of those posters, of how to get in touch with you again when they have access to do that, and understanding the policy and protocol for CDCR facility as well. So with that, again, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. But with that, we want to turn it to the next slide to talk about the rollout. And I put this picture up here because it's going to take a lot of us to kind of get this going, right? And Captain Stark, like I shared earlier, has really taken the lead on this, and we really appreciate that so much, because it means so much to inmates to have access to you all, and we're really, really excited about this. But with that being said, like I mentioned earlier, this will take an entire group of us to get this going and making this work out for everyone. So I'll turn the time over to Captain Stark on the rollout.
All right, so I don't, like I had said earlier, I don't have an actual time as to when it will go live, where we have the non-recorded free calls. Some institutions may already have that in place. I haven't received that report yet, but as soon as I receive an update as to when you can anticipate that they're toll-free confidential calls, I'll definitely make sure that Liliana and JDI are aware, so that they can make sure that everybody else is aware. I think that it would be also a really good time, if you aren't in good communication with your PCM, to develop that communication before we go live with that. Double check your MOUs and look at your Exhibit A's to make sure that you have all the information that you need on there. Try those phone numbers to make sure they work before you get a call where they really need to be working. If for some reason those numbers are wrong, or there's an issue and you can't get a hold of somebody, Liliana, feel free to give my number out. You can give me a call or email me. I'm only here during the day shift, but one of those numbers on that list should work. But you really do need all the numbers to be working and to have that good communication. Investigative Services Unit staff, really good resources. They're really the ones that are the feet on the floor that actually interview the inmate, do the investigation. It's really good to have a relationship with them also. Some of the rape crisis centers I know have really good communication between the institution and the rape crisis center, and a lot of the times that has been because they receive so many allegations, so they're just really familiar with each other because they're always there, or they're always at the forensic exam. So the communication and the relationship has been developed. Each institution has training, so every officer, every free person receives PREA training. So if that's something that potentially you may want to attend, that'd be something that you could talk to your PREA compliance manager about to see if they can get you into the next class. It's not required, but I know that we recently provided that training for JDI staff and for CalCASO staff, and they felt that it was, I believe that they felt that it was valuable and had some good information in it. So that, yeah. So that's something that if you're interested in, contact your PREA compliance manager, and they should be able to help you get involved with that training.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Captain Stark, for that. And again, just kind of keep in mind that this is going to be a process, and so the more communication you have with your PCM, the better. And I believe Juliana has already reached out to all of you to collect logos so that we can put them into the flyers. And also, if we went off of what was in Exhibit A, which you will all put in the information on how to contact you, and I believe all of you had your 24-hour hotline. If that's different, please reach out to Juliana to make sure that that's available, but that's updated if needed. Some of you might have a change in that, but please just let us know, and we'll make that change. And so, Juliana, can you put it back to the so just remember that if that you will have a copy, obviously, to share, to bring of the free and confidential calls, help is available poster. So if you want to take it to your PCM, that's great. But what we are planning is that Captain Stark will have a call with the PCMs to inform all PCMs in California of this change and that of this poster, and that this poster should be up in all facilities. And then again, we're really going to encourage you all when this happens to reach out to your PCMs and say, have you received it yet? Do you need any support on this, or do you have any questions? And really be a support for them as well. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. As we go through this process of having these free, non-recorded, confidential calls, please keep us in the loop of any trends you might be seeing, any need for any technical assistance. Juliana is here at Calcasa, Matthew, and then of course Jessica and I are also available too. And we meet quarterly with Captain Stark. And so any trends that are happening, Juliana, and Matthew, who are the day-to-day folks on this project, will keep us in the loop, and we'll let Captain Stark know of anything that's coming up. And so again, she's an integral part in our group and in our team, and so we keep her informed of what's happening, but we can't do that without you all letting us know what's happening, because you are all on the ground. So keep us informed. We do have a question from Alexa, and she says, are we allowed to just include the acronym on the address labels? So her center is called Riverside Area Rape Crisis Center, and she'd like to have it only say RARCC. Yes, of course, you can have that be on the labels when you're sending correspondence. And Jessica touched on that earlier. It might have, as long as it says, the acronym, right, and the Evidence Code 1035.4, privileged communication, staff will treat it, just like Captain Stark said earlier, as legal mail, and so it will continue to be confidential.
So it sounds like with that question from Alexa that they actually had a letter that was returned. If that does happen, if you use the acronym and the letter is returned, that would be a great time to actually contact your PREA compliance manager, because that may involve the PREA compliance manager doing a little bit of additional training with the mailroom. So the mailroom gets all that mail in, and they're going through it, and they have a list of things that are allowed, or a list of attorneys, of courts, of rape crisis center information, of things that are allowed to be processed as confidential communication, as legal mail. So maybe they didn't see that the RARCC, what it actually stands for, so there was confusion there, and then it was returned to sender. So if you do see that, that may just be a little bit more education for the mailroom staff so that they can update the list that they have and identify RARCC as something that is appropriately processed as legal mail.
So with that being said, I think that we should stay then with our acronym or our RCC's name so that it doesn't cause too much confusion for the mailroom if those need to be pre-authorized, so that if it's Riverside Area Rape Crisis Center, also it can also state, RARCC. If it's Project Sister Family Services, it could also be PSFS. So just making sure that your PREA compliance manager knows that and keep it within those two so that the mailroom can have that information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question. It would be really nice for the Advancing PREA project to develop a label with the evidence code that we could put on the letters. Awesome. We will look into that. And a label, like a sticky note, is that what you're talking about, Lauren? Just like a little sticky label that has the California evidence code on it? Great. Yeah, we'll work on that, and that's a really great suggestion. We can create something and send it all to you all, and so that you have a template, and if an easy way to kind of reprint them out if you need them. But we'll create a label that will hopefully we can create it so that it mirrors what we have on the Help is Available poster, so that they also make that connection. That will be really cool. Thanks for that, Lauren. Okay, so we have another question from Mary Lou. Can any PREA-trained advocate go into the prison, or do they have to be investigated and approached by the prison first?
So a gate clearance does have to be done. So if there's a group of people or individuals that you anticipate that you're going to have assigned to the prison that may be providing services, face-to-face services, through the visiting room process, that is something that you're going to want to talk to your PREA compliance manager about. He or she's going to have to collect the information on who those individuals are, and there will have to be, it's called a CLETS check, and they basically do a check. It requires that you provide your driver's license, social security number, full name, aliases, a few different things where they do a check of you, and then you get a gate clearance.
Yeah, and Mary, also one thing that we remind folks about, to remind inmates, is that we are confidential for sure. Anything that the Rape Crisis Center and the inmate discusses is confidential, but we can't promise that if we're going into the facility to provide follow-up services, that folks are not going to know, right? Because you are the local Rape Crisis Center, and then the staff person at the facility will have to pull them out. So that staff person will know that the Rape Crisis Center is asking for them to come out, right? But we really encourage, again, that relationship with the PCM, so that the PCM could, obviously provides training and education on how to work with that to keep the safety of the inmate in mind, especially when reporting or seeking services for sexual violence. And so you as the advocate is, or whoever your advocates are, just reminding the inmate of that staff person may know that the local rape crisis is coming to provide that follow-up services, and that you're going to have to reach out in order to provide that support, in-person support if requested from the facility, and if it's a possibility to do so on the day that you're trying to provide that support. So that's a really great question. So thank you. Hope that answered your question. Any other questions? Okay, so this might seem overwhelming for some folks. This might seem really exciting for others, and some might be thinking about, you know, how am I going to better this communication with my PCM? And so we are really, really, really looking forward to the great collaborative effort that will happen as we communicate with our PCMs, as we go and navigate through this process, and we're, you know, learning as we go. Again, we're hoping this will be a model. It's the first in California, so we applaud so much the work that Captain Stark has done for this, and especially, you know, her dedication to this project as well. But we could not do this without you, and so we really appreciate you who are working on, you know, ensuring that folks have access to you all, and that you're working in collaborations with your PCMs. Since this is a change, this might be something you want to share also at your START meetings. And if you're having those START meetings, please include your PCM. Let them know once this is out, like reach out to them, include them into your START meetings, send them the invite, you know, have them do a little bit of information of who they are and what their role is at CDCR. So, you know, be inclusive of them at your local START meetings. That again will be really helpful for them too, and for you as you continue to work along, you know, together on this project. And just if you need any support with the California Advancing PREA team, you're always welcome to email advocate@justdetention.org or prea@calcasa.org. You also have Juliana's email and Matthew's and Jessica's and mine. You're always welcome to reach out, and we're more than happy to help out with any questions you may have. But before I end and you know, have Captain Stark say goodbye to you all, is there any questions that you might have for us at this point? Okay, I don't think any questions come up. If they do, feel free to reach out. Okay, let's see. We have another question. Where do we find a copy of this webinar? We'll send it out to you, Colette. We'll send out the recording. We'll post it on our website, and we'll let you know where to find it as well. And we'll send you the copy of the slides as well. Captain Stark, any last words before we head out?
No, I just want to thank you all very much for the relationships that you have fostered with the institutions. Also, I want to thank CalCasa and JDI for all your help with this. And I think that we're moving to an even better place than when we were in. And, you know, I'm excited for that. And good luck to you all. I know that there may be some road bumps, and as we approach them, we will work towards making the process run even smoother. So please stay in contact. And I look forward to meeting. I've met some of you, but I'm hoping to meet more of you in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Captain Stark and Jessica and everybody, all of you. We appreciate your time and participation on this web conference. And please call us if you need any support or have any additional questions. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.